is there really any point in learning core computer science concepts from data structures and algorithms? Are these things relevant in really assessing a true candidate for a software engineering position? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about today. But before I get into that, just want to quickly mention that this video is brought to you by CLIQKI. CLIQKI is an influencer marketing platform based in West Africa. So if you're an influencer and you want to make money from your social media following, or if you're a brand and you're trying to create more awareness for your product or service, then log on to www.CLIQKI.com and get started today. Based in Nigeria, Kenya, and also in Ghana, with over 100,000 influencers. So I'll put a link below so that you can follow the link and you can sign up today. All right, so our coding interviews broken. With what's going on as of the time I'm recording this video, there are loads of tech layoffs, and there are also threats or even more layoffs to come, with big companies like Google, like Meta, like Amazon laying off people tremendously after what happened during COVID, where there was a large hiring boom, and all of a sudden, because of all these companies are looking at what is going on in the economy with possibly an inflation, and so they are preparing themselves for what might be an inflation, and that's why there are mass layoffs. And so because of the mass layoffs that are going on, and also because of tools like ChatGPT, people ask, is there really any point in data structures or learning data structures or algorithms and learning about all these core computer science concepts? Well, the first question that you ask is that why do we even have these kind of coding interviews whereby we do data structures and algorithms and all these complex kind of problems? Because it's high blue chip companies or big tech companies like the Facebook, the Amazons, the Netflix and the Googles have adopted them for as far back as I can remember. There's one thing about a behavioral interview where you can ask high-level questions, but how can you really tell if somebody's a good software engineer without having them to write software? I mean, there are different other approaches to doing that, by giving someone a take-home assignment or work with a particular tool, but because of these companies use different frameworks and different tools, it's hard to assess who's really a good programmer without asking them to actually code. And that's why the concept of data structures and algorithms and these core traditional, is what I would call it, coding interview styles has been adopted for the longest time. But one might argue, because of the tech layoffs as mentioned, and also because of tools like ChatGPT and AI, you find out there are some candidates who might not even necessarily know how to code, but they use these tools to pass coding interviews. Now, I want to say this: if you do that, stop it. I mean, stop it right now. Yes, you can pass or scale a coding interview by cheating and using ChatGPT or using an AI tool, but I'll tell you why it's a very bad idea to do that. Because even in tech generally, we all suffer from imposter syndrome. You walk into a tech company and you're going to feel like you're going to meet some extremely smart people, and you're going to feel like an imposter already. Now, if you cheated to get there, that will even compound the situation even more, because you're going to have situations whereby you're going to be challenged, you're going to feel frustrated. So even if you went through the frustration of learning or failing coding interviews over and over again, and eventually you secured the job by learning and by practicing, even though you might struggle with imposter syndrome when you walk into a company, but because you past that hurdle of believing in yourself and investing in yourself and learning how to scale these interviews, then it might, not 100%, but at least I promise you, you will definitely feel like an imposter if you cheated to get there. Now, not to say that, and people might argue and say, well, these things are not really a good assessment of people's skills of this as a software engineer. But well, I'll tell you what my take is on this. So, first of all, in tech, software engineering is not the only way to go into tech. There's so many ways you can go into tech. You can become a cloud engineer, be a solutions architect in the cloud. I did a video about AWS specifically. I'll put a link below. Or you can go into DevOps. You can be a systems engineer. You can be a network engineer. All these industries, or you can go into Kubernetes and be a Kubernetes administrator or Kubernetes developer, and these jobs pay from close to somewhere from $140,000 to over $200,000 a year. Obviously depends on your years of experience and also where you live, but those are jobs that you can do in tech that you don't have to necessarily be a software engineer. But now, if you do decide that you want to go into software, in my personal opinion, I mean, there are different ways or different jobs you can have. You can be going to data science, you can be a mobile application developer, you can be a web developer, you can be a back-end developer, you can be a front-end developer. Now, if you're trying to go into any of those areas, in my opinion, then it makes sense to learn about data structures, algorithms, and those core traditional computer science concepts. And this is why I think, in my opinion, it's important. I think it's important because there are different ways to go into technology, to become a software engineer. Personally, I went into a boot camp, and in a boot camp, you learn about frameworks. You learn tools to become job ready. You go into a boot camp in 12 weeks, you learn how to use React. You learn the basics of JavaScript, and you also learn maybe another programming language. And you might just in that 12-week skim through data structures and algorithms. However, it doesn't really go deep into, so you will be job ready, but you might not really understand the deep concepts of computer science. So if you go into a boot camp, if you're self-taught, you're becoming job ready. But in my opinion, I think there's some very important concepts that you learn from basic computer science. And in a way, I think that's what data structures and algorithms and all these algorithmic style interview questions aim to improve you on, or to test you on. Because there's one thing to be high level and understand how to use frameworks, but I think there's something very powerful about really understanding deep how things work, how memories are located, and exactly how all these things work together. And so here's what I believe you should do in terms of preparing for coding interviews. Now, this is somebody that don't take my opinion for it. I've failed multiple coding interviews. I've done extremely bad at coding interviews, and I've done well also at some coding interviews. But I watched the video recently, and I'll put a link below, by an engineer by Utsav, and it's something he said that I think was very, very important. And I believe the first approach that you might want to take to learning data structures and algorithms is having a context. Is what he called context-based learning. It's one thing to look at all lead code and look at all the problems from dynamic programming to binary trees to binary search trees to arrays, and how does all this work? Reverse the linked list. Am I going to use that in my day-to-day job? Well, what he talks about, context-based approach, he talks about how the practical applications of some of these problems, like maybe I think you should watch the video. He did a much better job than I possibly can, but he explains how all these core computer science concepts of like data structure and algorithms, and how it works in everyday life, whether you're building something at Twitter or you're building an application at Uber, and he brings the relationship between these two. I'll put a link below. And so the first is having a context-based approach, and I think that will really help you to help us to understand more about data structure and algorithms. And the second thing I think that is important is to go deep. More than just understanding the framework, how to use a framework, is really taking the time to go into understanding some concepts. There are a couple of videos on YouTube channels that really help me to understand things at a deeper level, whether it's from networking, whether it's from storage. I believe it's called PowerCert. I'll put the link here below to watch that channel. It really covers deep core technology concepts, which even if they're not just related to software, they are technology concepts as a whole, but I think it's important to understand all these concepts and see how it all works together. Third thing I'll say is don't rush. Now, I know it's hard in terms of I know for me, when I graduated from a boot camp, I wanted a job yesterday. And so I was just rushing to learn everything I could, whether it was AWS, whether it was Python. I was trying to rush and cram as many things as possible because obviously when you're interviewing for a job, you're expected to know a whole bunch of things. But and I know we're all in different situations, but I believe that if you take your time to, like I mentioned, go deep and just don't rush and really take your time to understand the concepts, it will really pay you off in the long run. And then the fourth thing I'll say is interview a lot. I mean, I did a whole bunch of interviews. I use a platform called interviewing.io, where you actually get to talk to an actual interviewer. And I think, in my opinion, it helps your communication skills. Yes, you could use ChatGPT, and ChatGPT can show you exactly how to write the code, how to reverse a linked list. But interviewing with a human being in a way helps you to build your communication skills, how you communicate when it comes to things that have to do with technology. And I think that's also very, very important. So I interviewed a lot. Interviewing.io was a very great platform. I also use other tools like Algo Expert for their IDE, which also helps you in terms of syntax, and it explains at a very, very high level a lot of how these algorithms and data structures work. So that's also, I don't get paid for saying this, but I like that. I think it was a cool platform that worked for me. So 4 things really. And I still, to summarize, I think yeah, people might argue that code interviews might be broken and there's a better way. Probably there is, but I think there is a lot of value, in my personal opinion. Recently, I remember I still even recently interviewed for a position, and they said that as much as it was a virtual interview where you do a code challenge, the last level was that you would actually be in a they were going to fly each candidate in person because they wanted to see how you interacted, because a lot of people are doing this whole ChatGPT thing just to scale interviews, which in my opinion, for a lot of reasons, is not the best idea, because like I said, you will always struggle with imposter syndrome, and in a way doing that sometimes will make you feel like you really an imposter, because in the back of your mind you're like, I cheated to get here. And anyways, I don't want to get into all that. So context-based learning, go deep, try as much as possible not to rush and interview a lot. So I do think there's value in this kind of in the traditional coding interviews is the way they are. It's not the best assessment of whether you're a good programmer or not, I agree, but there is also, in my opinion, some value in these kinds of interviews. So that is my rant. Let me know what you think, and until next time, like I always say, my wish for you is that you learn how to code, because coding is changing and will change the world. And those who get involved early, in my personal opinion, will greatly impact the future. And if that is you, then let's go change the world.